right direction. We believe that it is a byproduct of the U.S. government and this administration's efforts in the region. Diplomatically, what the President, Secretary Blinken, and others have been doing around the clock. Of course, we are going to continue to want to see more. We have not parsed our words about the dire humanitarian circumstances in Gaza, and it's something that we're going to continue to engage on with the Israelis on what other avenues are available for ensuring access to humanitarian aid and humanitarian pauses that will allow for the safe movement of civilians. This is a welcome step in the right direction, and we, of course, are going to continue to work with our Israeli partners on what other avenues may be possible.
My last issue is, Israel often, and you guys from this podium and other podiums, often accuse that Hamas is using people as human shields and so on. They were saying that in Shifa Hospital there was a photograph or surveillance of a manhole and turned out to be just for water. Let me ask you something. Do you have a definition to what is a human shield?
Said, it is important here when we talk about this. We don't. This isn't, and you've heard me say this before this week. This is not hyperbole. It is fact. Hamas is a designated terrorist organization. It's been a designated terrorist organization since 1997 and has been so over the course of multiple administrations of varying political parties. And we know that there is a vast network of Hamas integrating itself through civilian infrastructure, co-locating itself with key civilian infrastructure, using Palestinian civilians as human shields by doing so, by co-locating itself in such ways.
Okay, I just want to remind you that this term was actually invented by Mahatma Gandhi when he was fighting the British, but I'm not going to go into the history and so on. But also I want to remind you that, in fact, in the Israeli-Palestinian context, it was the Israelis who introduced the term and the activity. They would bring in the kids, tie them to the jeeps and so on. There are plenty of pictures that I can send you and share with everybody here to disallow or to prevent the other kids from throwing stones at them.
Cited.
The ones that actually introduced.
Let's not lose sight of the fact. Let's not lose sight of the fact that Hamas has brought this war to Gaza, and they are a terrorist organization that is hijacking the political future of the Palestinian people.
Vedant, just my last point. The Israeli Defense Ministry is really located in a densely populated area. So if the situation was reversed and somebody somehow struck a rocket onto that thing and civilians were killed, would you call that a human shield? Would you call that the Israeli Defense Ministry?
In any circumstance, in countries around the world, we have been incredibly clear about the moral imperative to ensure that steps are taken so that civilian casualties and impacts on civilians are minimized.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I come to you right after Nick? Nadia, go ahead.
Thank you. Following up on this 4-hour humanitarian pause, the White House said that it's going to start today. So it's like around 8:30, I think, in the evening now in Gaza. So do you still believe that's going to start today, implemented today?
I have no different update. That's our understanding.
Okay. Is Gaza City included in this 4-hour pause as well?
I will let our Israeli partners speak to the specific operations about this, Nadia. I'm not going to get into the operational details from up here.
Also, the Israeli defense minister just now said actually that they're not going to stop fighting. So do we believe them, or do we believe you and the White House that actually there is a 4-hour humanitarian pause?
This was an announcement coming from the Israeli government, so I will let them clarify anything that needs to be clarified. We don't speak on behalf of them. What I will just say is that the announcement of this is reflective of work that our administration, President Biden, Secretary Blinken, others, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan have been doing around the clock because of the critical role that we've been playing on the importance of ensuring the flow of humanitarian aid, ensuring that humanitarian pauses are possible so that voluntary movement of civilians is able to take place and potentially allow for the conditions to be created for hostages.
And you said there's going to be 2 corridors for people to go from north to south. So when they leave via the sea or the other route, Do you think, where are they supposed to go? Because if we think there is no water, no electricity, so they're gonna be in the open air? I'm just like practical question.
I totally understand your question, and again, I will leave it to our Israeli partners to speak to the specifics about
Okay,
this.
and one final thing
And then
about the
okay,
hostages.
one final one.
Yeah, about the hostages. Do you think that Islamic Jihad, who seems to be holding other hostages, not just Hamas, is this other routes that the U.S. is following with mediation, maybe perhaps in Lebanon or elsewhere? There's other channels, not just through Egypt and Qatar?
I'm just not going to get into the ongoing and sensitive efforts. We have actively been working to release all the hostages in Gaza, including those Americans, and we've been clear that the U.S. supports humanitarian pauses to get hostages out, but I'm not going to get into the specifics of any of that ongoing work. Nick, go ahead.
It's somewhat related. Thank you.
Yeah.
There are also negotiations for a 3-day humanitarian pause for the release of about a dozen hostages, according to sources who are involved in those negotiations. Is that in any way connected to these 4-hour pauses that were announced today? If so, how? And if not, can you shed some light on the negotiations?
Our hope is that conditions can continue to be created that would eventually get us to a place where some of these hostages can be released. The announcement that was today is about ensuring the flow of humanitarian aid, as well as allowing the ability for civilians to move safely and depart areas where there might be hostilities taking place. But again, we'll continue to keep our eye on the ball when it comes to release of these hostages, and it's something that we'll continue to engage on with our Israeli partners. And should the news from today or other humanitarian pauses that potentially could be forthcoming allow for the release of hostages, that of course would be a step in the right direction also. Camilla, go ahead.
Thank you, Vedant.
Yeah.
We've reported that CIA Director Bill Burns is in Doha along with the head of Israel's Mossad. Incidentally, they were there before this the 4-hour humanitarian pauses was announced. We've been told that he's there for various discussions, but also to facilitate hostage negotiations. Just wondered if you could clarify on who's leading the charge on hostage negotiations on the U.S. side, and then I have one about fuel after that.
So first and foremost, I'd defer to the Central Intelligence Agency to speak to the director's travels. What I will say is that across the interagency, this is continues to be a priority for our government. It's what I mentioned yesterday, why Deputy Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs Steve Gillen remains in Israel, and this is something this department and other pieces of the U.S. government continue to engage on extensively.
And just on fuel, Ambassador Satterfield briefed reporters a little earlier today. He says that there's now fuel available to UN implementers in Gaza, and that he's hoping that more fuel will be able to get in for other aid workers. That effort to get more fuel in, is that hope that goes alongside the 4-hour pauses that have just been announced, or is that a separate effort from the pauses that have just been announced?
So the mechanical and technical way in which we would ensure the access to fuel, I'm just not going to comment on that given sort of the technical and operational specifications. What I will just say is that we know very clearly that there is a dire need for fuel in Gaza. It is key to a number of lines of efforts, whether that be desalination of water, clean water treatment, other wastewater efforts, the provision of medical care, and that is exactly why Special Envoy Satterfield has been engaged on this, to do everything we can in close coordination with Egyptian authorities, Israeli authorities, donors, humanitarian aid agencies, to turn that, to do whatever we can to increase that. Barbara, go ahead.
Similar kind of question, actually. So the IDF has been quite clear that these are tactical local pauses for movement from a specific area to the south. Which sounds like from the Israeli point of view, they're completely focused on getting or allowing Palestinians to leave northern Gaza to southern Gaza. In what way do you think, or can you say anything about how this might be expanded to aid? Like, it doesn't sound like it has anything to do with the aid side of it. So I guess similar to what Camilla was asking about, how do you see this moving towards
the
getting
hope
aid?
is, Barbara, the hope is that through these pauses, through these hours and movements that are going to be taking place, that aid is able to reach those who need it, and the conditions will be created to not just allow for the additional flow of aid through the Rafah crossing, but also to those civilians who may be using that time to move, that aid is able to get to them as well. Again, I will leave it to our Israeli partners to speak specifically about the operational details of this, but we believe that this is an important step in the right direction that simultaneously will allow Israel to continue to hold Hamas accountable for these October 7th terrorist attacks. Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah, Vedant, first, any U.S. official will participate in the Arab and Islamic summits that will be held in Saudi Arabia, and what do you expect from these summits?
Michelle, those summits are being held as part of at least our understanding, the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic States. The United States is not an observer or a member of either of those entities, so I don't expect any participation from the United States of America, but we'll be, of course, paying close attention, and I'm not going to get ahead of that process.
And one more attacks today on U.S. military bases in Iraq after the U.S. reaction yesterday in Syria. Any comment?
So, since you asked, Michelle, U.S. fighter aircraft conducted a proportionate precision self-defense airstrike in eastern Syria against one facility used by Iran's IRGC and affiliated groups. The IRGC and affiliated groups recently directed attacks on U.S. and coalition bases in Iraq and Syria. And as I have said from this podium over the course of the week, we will continue to take decisive military action to defend U.S. personnel in the region. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Vedant. Especially after the announcement of for our humanitarian pause in northern Gaza today, which would allow people to move to the south, there are some concerns about the integrity of Gaza. And Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas also today said that any move by Israel to divide Gaza into two sections is unacceptable. I was wondering, how can you address those concerns, and do you share similar concerns about the territorial integrity of Gaza?
Rabia, I assume you saw the Secretary's comments in Tokyo yesterday morning, and I think it was a very clear laydown of what we see as steps that can be taken to ensure that this crisis never happens again, and that is setting conditions for durable peace and security. And of course, part of that is considering and thinking about the future of Gaza. And I just was very clear that first, no forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza continues to be something that we feel very strongly about. We also feel strongly that Gaza cannot be a platform for terrorism or other violent attacks. We also feel that no reoccupation of Gaza after the conflict ends is something that can happen either, as well as no attempt to blockade or besiege Gaza. We think that these are principles that will help set the conditions for a durable peace and security for the region.
One more, please.
Sure.
I wanted to ask if you have any comments on Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz's remarks today, in which, in a tweet, he said journalists who covered the October 7 attack and did not intervene, quote unquote, are no different than terrorists and should be treated as such. Do you have any reactions on that?
I've not seen those comments, so I don't have any immediate reaction to offer you for that. Sam, go ahead.
Thank you. You just said you're for a durable peace and security, and you want Israel to abide by international law. I'm going to pick up where I left off yesterday. Does the U.S. recognize the Fourth Geneva Convention as applying to Gaza and the West Bank?
Sam, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the legal aspects of this. I would have to double check for you. But what I will just say is that we have
I don't want to
made
take
clear.
up a lot of time if we're going to just
Great,
repeat.
we can.
No. I mean, I'd like to move on.
Okay, wonderful.
If you're just going to repeat, it has been long-standing U.S. policy
that the Fourth Geneva Convention does apply. Indeed, if the Fourth Geneva Convention doesn't apply, it's not clear to me what legal constraints there are on Israel. The Hansel memo was issued by Cyrus Vance when he was Secretary of State. That was U.S. policy. That's been U.S. policy. Pompeo seems to have said, we're not going to abide by this. Has this State Department, has the Biden-Blinken State Department effectively abrogated decades of U.S. policy and adopted the Pompeo policy on this question?
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but
The Hansel memo is.
I understand what the Hansel memo is, but I'm asking what your question.
Does it still apply? Does this State Department still abide by the Hansel?
We have had no change in policy as it relates to the Hansel memo, which is something that Matt has spoken to a number of months ago as well. But let me just reiterate, Sam, that this we have. From the forefront of this conflict, we have talked about very clearly the need for ensuring that this military operation is conducted in accordance with international law. That's something we continue to talk about. We continue to abide by that today.
But which law? Which law? The Fourth Geneva Convention or not?
Go ahead, Alex.
Which law? Yeah. It's a free fire zone if you're not going to abide by the
Go ahead, Alex.
Convention. Which law? You're creating the legal construct.
Sam, we've taken two of your. If you're going to interrupt your colleagues, I'm going to ask you to leave.
No, I'm interrupting you.
The rest of the room has questions that they would like to get to. I've taken your question every day of this week.
Thank you,
Alex. Please go ahead.
I just haven't gotten an answer.
Please go ahead, Alex.
I want to push on the corridor issue.
Sure.
We were told by the White House this morning that the first corridor has been in use, right? I mean, what's new here? Is it just about the time period that is new, or because it has been used for multiple days now?
There was this announcement of this additional corridor, as well as some of the specific updates that we're sharing, which again, our Israeli partners can talk to you in more detail about.
All right, we were told from the get-go that the Gaza death toll cannot be trusted, assuming that Hamas group is interested in exaggerating those numbers. And we were today we are hearing from Assistant Secretary Barbara Leaf on the Hill. She said that those numbers are apparently higher than what they are being announced. Is that your final assessment? And if so, how do you want us to swallow that?
Alex, the important thing to remember here is let me say a couple things. First, any number over zero when it comes to civilian casualties is heartbreaking. These are they represent the losses of futures, the losses of potential, the loss of dreams. When we are talking about the Hamas-run Ministry of Health, what we are saying is that this is a group that has a track record of being untruthful when it comes to civilian casualties. We are in no way trying to imply that there has not been an impact on civilians and that there has not been a significant amount of civilian lives lost in Gaza because of this conflict. We have been clear-eyed about that, and we have not been naive about the impact that this has had on civilians. What we were speaking about before, Alex, again, is just that this is a group that is run by Hamas that has a track record of being untruthful about the numbers. But we take issue with any of these numbers being above zero. One civilian life lost is too much. One civilian life lost is going too far. And that is why we are taking steps to ensure, in close coordination with our Israeli partners, that conditions can be created to minimize civilian casualties. The humanitarian pauses announced earlier this morning are a welcome step in that direction.
But is it the final assessment that actual number is higher than the 10,000?
I have no reason to dispute what Assistant Secretary Leaf said. I've not seen those comments. I was not participating in that congressional hearing, but I'm happy to check back specifically for you.
On different topics.
Sure. Actually, I came to you already.
Sure. It was a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Yes. So just to clarify, you said that the Hamas-run Ministry of Health has a track record of being untruthful. I just wonder if you could elaborate on that, because the UN has been using their numbers, and in fact, I believe the State Department has used their numbers for its report
Weird.
as well. So
I spoke to this. I spoke to this at a briefing. I think you were absent at.
Perhaps I was.
Yeah. So there is not a different entity conducting this account of this metric right now, and so it is a number the UN uses. It's the number the State Department uses in its own internal site ret and things of that nature. That does not necessarily mean that it is a number that is wholly accurate. But again, the important takeaway here, Barbara, is that any number above zero is something that we will continue to take issue with. But again, there is not, unless the BBC is aware of something that I'm not, there is not a separate entity conducting account for civilian casualties in Gaza, aside from the Ministry of Health that is run by Hamas. So that is the number that we will continue to use internally.
Sorry, but all in the previous wars, that Hamas were accurate actually in the numbers. Why do you think this time they're not accurate?
We're just not going to get into the specific intelligence assessments, Nadia, but we have seen reporting, especially around the attack on the hospital in Gaza, where there has been misinformation and some of the casualty figures have been misreported. Again, this is not to minimize the impact that there has been on civilian casualties in Gaza. Go ahead.
Thank you, Vedant. Just please, because it's a little bit confusing. Today, the announcement of humanitarian pauses is interpreted like a breakthrough. I mean, what if you can walk us through the difference between what's happening now, because we are seeing humanitarian aid entering to Gaza. Some civilians are able to depart, but they are not safe all the time. So is it a breakthrough? I mean, and what's the difference between what you announced today and what we are looking or waiting for in a potential deal on hostage 3 days of humanitarian pause?
We think that this is a result of our diplomacy and our engagement in the region. And this is something that the Secretary of State, President Biden, Jake Sullivan, others have been very direct about with their counterparts in the Israeli government about the need for pauses and efforts like this. Yes, there has been humanitarian aid flowing into Gaza. Yes, there has been the ability for Palestinian civilians and foreign nationals to be able to not just move within Gaza, but also those who have an intended wish to do so to depart Gaza. What this is about is our Israeli partners sharing with some more specificity about efforts that had already been underway, but also some additional efforts that they are pursuing to ensure that these things can happen. And I will let them speak to those details in more specificity.
One more question, if I may. You've been saying that a ceasefire is only beneficial for Hamas. Do you assess that the current situation is beneficial for Israel, militarily and strategically speaking?
I'm not going to opine or comment on the specifics of the military operation. What this is about is ensuring that Hamas is never able to repeat the attacks of October 7th again, which is what a unilateral ceasefire would allow them to do, allow them to regroup, re-strengthen themselves, position themselves to carry out its stated intent of continuing to attack violently against the Israeli people. Goel, go ahead.
Two questions, please.
Yeah.
One, as far as the Secretary's visit to India is concerned, if there were issues discussed like these terrorist organizations, they keep attacking like India, 26/11, 9/11 US, and now 7/10 in Israel, among other countries, and they keep changing their names. You can ban them, sanction them, anything you can do. So where do we go from here? Future, then they will hold innocent hostages, and then they want to trade them in.
Secretary Blinken is heading to New Delhi as part of the 2+2 security dialogue with Secretary Austin, and so I have no doubt deepening our security cooperation will be a topic that is discussed by Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, and their counterparts in the Ministry of External Affairs and Ministry of Defense. I will let that trip play out before we share further, but I have no doubt that cooperation, especially in the counterterrorism space, is something that will come up, and areas where we can potentially deepen our partnership.
Second question, sir. As far as the nuclear weapons of Pakistan are concerned, one minister in Pakistan said that we are not obligated not to sell Ukraine nuclear weapons because we have not signed NPT. And because of the cash flow problem in Pakistan, there is a discussion between Ukraine and Pakistan because ministers met in Pakistan. So what do you have any about these comments?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of your question.
Pakistan want to sell to Ukraine, and Pakistan's minister said that we are not obligated to any international pressure because we have not signed NPT.
I have not seen that report, and so I'm not just going to hold back on commenting on it until I see it. Sure, go ahead.
Thank you so much about Southeast Asia. What I want to ask you that before I ask you, let me tell you that with the support of USA, Bangladesh government took a zero tolerance policy in combating terrorism and radicalism. Media reporting the achievement positively contributes to the counterterrorism effort and national interest of USA. How do you evaluate the achievement of the current government about this matter?
So I will speak about this in broad terms that you've heard me say before, that last year we celebrated 50 years of diplomatic relations with Bangladesh, and of course that this is a country that we're looking to continue to deepen our relationships and partnerships with, as there continue to be a number of areas, including trade, cooperation in the climate space, cooperation in the security space, and otherwise, where that potential exists.
Thank you so much. I have one line question. Do you support the unelected caretaker government in Bangladesh as opposition demanding before the general election? Thank you.
I'm pretty sure I answered this question yesterday, or the day before that, or the day before that.
We're getting answer every time that everybody wants in Bangladesh free and fair election.
And that continues.
The question is, if you support unelected caretaker government,
as you've heard us say, we do not support a particular government or a political party or candidate in any country. That in areas where there are elections ongoing, our goal and intent is for these elections to take place in a free and fair way that respect the will of the people of that country. Go ahead in the back.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
During a press conference in Seoul, Secretary Blinken said that the United States is seeing and witnessing Russia providing technology and support to North Korea for its military programs. So I'm wondering, can you give us more clarity on what support and what technology being provided to North Korea? And I have another question.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, no, why don't you ask your second question?
The second question is, when it comes to North Korea, the policy focus has always been like deterrence and sanctions enforcement. But the U.S. obviously has stressed its intent to re-engage with North Korea. But I'm wondering if there are any behind-the-scenes efforts underway to kickstart direct engagement with North Korea at this point.
So this is, of course, something that our special representative Sung Kim is deeply engaged on. And you're right, we have been clear-eyed that our intent and goal for the Korean Peninsula is a complete denuclearization, and we have been upfront with Pyongyang about our willingness to engage in diplomacy without preconditions, and that continues to be the case. Specifically as it relates to the Secretary's comments, I don't have any additional specifics to provide, but we have seen a track record of countries like Russia continue to carry the DPRK's water, especially in forums like the United Nations Security Council. And our belief is that any country that claims to have relationships with the DPRK or influence over the DPRK has a responsibility to make clear to them that their actions continue to be destabilizing, that they continue to violate a number of sanctions, that their activities continue to be in violation of a number of UN Security Council resolutions also. Go ahead. We'll come back to you, Alex.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
There's a growing concern in Ukraine, today also echoed by President Zelensky, that the war in the Middle East between Israel and Gaza has distracted attention from Russia's brutal actions in Ukraine. Do you share those concerns?
Absolutely not. We continue to be able to keep focused on the varying challenges that exist around the planet. That, of course, also includes Russia's ongoing assault on Ukraine. It was just a number of weeks ago, Alex, I think even the last week or the week before, where we announced yet another tranche of security assistance for our Ukrainian partners. And this is something that will continue to be focused on. In President Biden's Oval Office address, he talked about the importance of not just, of course, ensuring that Israel has what it needs to defend its security, but also that our Ukrainian partners continue the support that they have been getting so that they can continue to defend themselves against the infringement on their territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Thank you. And second topic, a final one.
Sure.
The president yesterday proclaimed November 9 as International World Freedom Day, and he pledged his administration will support human rights everywhere around the world. I'm just curious, how is it gonna look like on your end at the State Department? Are you guys gonna beef up your toolkit when it comes to human rights?
Who said that? Sorry.
The president yesterday announced November 9 as the World Freedom Day.
Well, Alex, one of the first things that Secretary Blinken, President Biden, Vice President Harris made clear at the beginning of this administration was the role that human rights is going to continue to play and the forefront at which we put it when it comes to our foreign policy. And that will continue to be the case. Around the world, when we have seen infringements on human rights, we have been clear about that. From this very briefing room, Secretary Blinken regularly comes down to talk about the department's annual human rights report and the conditions of human rights in varying countries and the steps the United States can take to address those. So it's something that will continue to be focused on. Camilla.
Circling back to Israel,
Yeah.
Gaza, but on this building,
Yeah.
today's CBS reported that senior State Department officials have held so-called listening sessions for diplomats in 6 U.S. embassies in the Middle East and North Africa to be able to address any concerns amongst diplomats about U.S. policy, but also any concerns related to the background of diplomats. Can you comment on this at all, and can you give any more information about ongoing efforts in this building to deal with any concerns or dissent among State Department staff as this conflict continues?
Thanks, Camilla. So out of respect to this process and out of respect to the workforce, I will talk about this in a little bit more broad terms than the specific engagements. But broadly, I would just say yes, it has been incredibly important for Secretary Blinken and this department's leadership to be able to engage directly with the workforce on a variety of areas. First and foremost, ensuring that this workforce knows and has access to the various resources that exist in the federal government, should they be interested in taking advantage of some of those resources. Additionally, we also recognize that this has been a trying time for our workforce around the country. And so just as we would here in DC, we've ensured that our missions around the world, particularly those that might be more heightened attention right now to what's happening in the Middle East, have access to those resources and are able to interface with department leaders about not just what's happening in the region, but the ways that this department can continue to serve them. Michelle, go ahead.
What's your understanding of the photojournalists who took footage for the October 7 attacks in Gaza?
I've seen those reports, Michelle, and I just don't have any comment to offer on those right now. Nadia, go ahead.
So the president apparently just told reporters now that he was asking for a longer humanitarian pause in Gaza. So do you think that with $14 billion that you give them, plus the $4 billion, plus all the leverage and the weapons, the president cannot get what he wants from the Israelis? cannot even extend it beyond 3 days?
Nadia, the announcement that was made public today is something that this administration, including the president, including the secretary, it's something that they wanted to, of course, see happen. But as I said when speaking to Nick and Simon, this is not a moment in time, black and white, this happened and therefore another step can't be taken. We will continue to work directly with our Israeli partners, as we have, about what other options are available to ensure the flow of humanitarian aid, to ensure that civilians are able to be kept out of harm's way. That's something that we're going to continue to work
Do you
towards.
feel frustrated that you don't get more than like 4 hours, 3 hours?
Today's
more
announcement
since the presidency
today's
was-
announcement was a welcome step, and we have never taken our foot off the gas, and we'll continue to work directly with partners in the region about the seriousness we place on the flow of humanitarian aid. Mikhail, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Vedant. You said many times the last 2 days that you are against the occupation of Gaza by the Israelis. Before, but everybody forgot it, I think. You said that you are against the occupation of Ukraine by the Russians. And in my opinion, you are very right to say that. But can we say that you are also against all the occupations in the world? For example, of the occupation of Cyprus by your allies, the Turks?
Mikhail, each circumstance is different, and it would be inappropriate for me to offer a broad brush comment like that on every case across the world.
Another question.
Yeah.
Do you have any good news, maybe, to share with us about Sweden joining NATO, for example? Can you tell us if Hungary has removed the obstacles, if Turkey removes the obstacles? Any news?
This is something that our diplomats in Ankara and Hungary are continuing to work around the clock. The secretary raised this with Foreign Minister Vedant on his travels. Of course, this is something we have not held back the importance that we have placed on seeing that Sweden ascend to NATO as swiftly as possible. We have long felt that the conditions laid out under the trilateral memorandum of understanding under the Madrid summit have been met, and that Sweden is ready to be a NATO ally. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The question is about Russia and Latin America.
Sure.
2 days ago, the State Department alerted about a disinformation campaign happening in different media markets in Latin America with nefarious purposes, allegedly by Russia. Can you detail the specific media markets that you're worried about and the nature of this campaign?
I'm happy to check with the Global Engagement Center about specifics that we can share. We can follow up with you on that. Go ahead.
Thank you for taking the question. So I have some questions about the upcoming APEC summit. So I know that you guys don't want to get ahead of the president and the secretary's schedule, but I'm wondering if you can share some details about what might be the top topics or issues that can come up during the summit, especially with regard to the meeting between President Biden and the Chinese leader Xi Jinping.
Well, you're right. I'm absolutely not going to get ahead of the president's schedule or the secretary's own schedule as well. But let me just say that we are thrilled to be serving as APEC's host this year. And the Leaders Week is going to mark the culmination of our efforts as it relates to APEC. And we have been focused on showcasing and highlighting our economic leadership as well as our commitment to multilateral engagement in the Asia Pacific and the world broadly. And we believe that APEC is an opportunity to highlight the direct benefits of the international economic engagement and some of the things that the United States has been leading on. So I would say tune in next week and we'll have more to share over the course of the summit.
And secondly, so reportedly President Xi and President Biden will, the meeting between them will result in an announcement to resume military-to-military communication between the two countries. Is that the case? Can you confirm?
Again, I think I just said I'm not going to speak to the president or the secretary's schedule. I will leave it to the White House to announce any plans for the president. So,
And
you got two questions already. Go ahead, Joseph, in the back.
Thanks. Back to Palestine, Israel. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights yesterday said that the quote-unquote the atrocities perpetrated by Palestinian armed groups on October 7th were heinous. They were war crimes. He also said the collective punishment by Israel of Palestinian civilians is also a war crime, and that the unlawful forcible evacuation of civilians is as well. Does the U.S. agree with the UN assessment?
I spoke about this earlier this week when it relates to questions about any of these kinds of legal determinations. We have a rigorous process in place for evaluating these kinds of things and have not made that assessment in this case. But this is a situation we're going to continue to pay attention to and remain in close partnership with Israel.
It's an ongoing evaluation as things develop day by day.
I spoke to this earlier in the week. Again, we have a rigorous process in place, and it's not an assessment that we have made thus far.
Second, just quickly, do you believe? I mean, this is the UN saying it, which is seen as a objective side by lots of folks, including this administration. Do you believe that the U.S. reputation, specifically among traditional Arab partners and allies, has taken a hit because of what the UN is saying are war crimes? And you said this earlier, that you guys uphold human rights and preach about human rights across the world. And many folks are saying, including the UN, that there are human rights violations being committed by the Israelis.
Let me just say that the secretary, as part of his travels, twice in the past month, has engaged deeply with our partners in the Arab world about steps that can be taken to address the current ongoing situation in Gaza. First and foremost, steps that we can all collectively take to further hold Hamas accountable for those terrorist attacks on October 7th. Steps that we all can collectively take to ensure the flow of humanitarian aid. And you've seen partner countries take actions and steps of their own when it comes to the provision of humanitarian aid. And we, of course, welcome that. And that's something we're going to continue to work on as well. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Secretary Blinken is in India, and India-Canada tensions are escalating, especially after the expulsion of more than 40 Canadian diplomats. Is the U.S. still trying to mediate or asking India to cooperate with the Canadian investigation of the murder of Palestinian leader Hadith Singh Nijjar?
This is something that we're, of course, continuing to engage on with our partners in India, as well as our partners in Canada as well.
Sir, one more question, if you allow me. So don't you think by ignoring Israeli brutalities in Gaza, United States is sending a wrong message to the powerful militaries and powerful countries around the world that they can do anything by killing thousands of innocent people, including children, on the name of self-defense? If tomorrow any other powerful country or powerful military do the same thing, what will be your position then?
From podiums across this government, you have not seen us parse our words about the moral and strategic imperative to minimize and take steps to ensure that civilian casualties aren't taking place over the course of this conflict. And that's something that we're going to continue to raise directly with our Israeli partners. You've seen us do so. We've laid out steps that could potentially be taken to minimize this. We welcome the news today on the humanitarian pause, and we'll continue to work at this. Last question, Simon.
Come back to this phrase. You talked about the rigorous process that's in place to assess in different situations, crimes against humanity, genocide, those kind of things. Could you just clarify? It sounded like there is a rigorous process in place to make those determinations, but you haven't initiated a process.
That is correct. I think a colleague from your exact newsroom asked the same question a couple days ago. No, I'm not at all parsing the importance of the question. I just think I've spoken to it a couple times this week. I'm not going to get into the specifics of those rigorous processes. These are internal deliberative processes. Right. That is as a par for the course when we talk about the ways in which we go about this. But there is a rigorous process in place, and we have not come to that conclusion in this specific case.
Whose decision is it to initiate that rigorous?
It is a process across the interagency, is my understanding, but I'm happy to see if we have any specifics we can share.
Can you say sort of, it would be something initiated by the Secretary of State to say, we're going to look into...
Again, I don't want to misspeak the specifics of the parameters of how they work, so I'm happy to check back and get back to you in a broad sense.
You were asked about it a couple of days ago, so I thought you might have had a chance.
Again, I'm happy to check the specifics for you. All right, thanks everybody.